Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain and Logistics, the Storytellers. The series is brought to you by Cap Logistics. Cap Logistics, they're experts offering you customized transportation solutions for all of your needs. So please visit caplogistics.com today. So I'm really excited about our show. We have a great storyteller today, and we're going to talk about heavy hauling and logistics and what that term means and kind of compliance and regulations in the state of Colorado. So I'd like to welcome Jeff Cummings with Duffy Crane. So Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Before we jump into the topic, we like to learn a little bit about our guest. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Duffy Crane. When you and I were talking off air, it's kind of a pretty cool story about the company, and then talk a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into this industry.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Doug. You do note that we started in 1886, which puts us, I think, just before or right around when the state became a state. And started with, I get that question quite a bit, and the origination of the company was horse and wagon and hauling goods from the train station to either a storage location, most commonly a storage location. You said Duffy Crane are the best. We're about half and half, 50% heavy haul, 50% crane work. And in that tradition, we're still moving things. 80% of what we do is front range in 4 locations, and that we're told that makes us the second oldest company in Colorado. So we had a number of companies consolidate in the last 5 or 6 years, but I'm pretty good looking for 133 years.
I know, that's amazing. When I saw it, I'm like, okay, there were no trucks, or and like, what did you do in 1886? So that's a great explanation of how the company got started. What about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm originally a St. Louis, and I've really only lived 2 places, St. Louis, and then moved out here in '98. In part because my wife looked over at me and said, I had business interests out here at the time. She said, the family loves it out there, let's go. And I really kind of drug my feet. But I started out as a CPA, got into the insurance and risk side of heavy equipment. And about 30 years ago, which starting to date how old I am, got into the ownership and running of heavy haul and crane type equipment and some steel erection. And in 2004, bought this company, which had been in the family for 4 generations till I bought it.
Excellent.
So the first non-Duffy owner of Duffy.
Very good. Well, I'm glad you kept the name.
Well, me too. I don't think they wanted Cummings crane and heavy haul, so.
Good deal. Well, we've used that term heavy haul a little bit here. So for our audience, maybe we talk about what does that mean, right? So I'm the average person listening on the show right now, and heavy haul, that sounds kind of cool, but what does that really mean? And maybe give an example of some services that a heavy haul provider would use. So let's just start there.
Sure. People would most be used to commercial trucking being in the what would be called legal loads. So that would be everything up to 80,000 pounds. And so pretty much from state to state and across interstate lines, a legal load is that people are used to seeing is 80,000 pounds and down. Heavy haul starts anything up, just to make it simple. It does vary a little bit from state to state, but basically that's anything over 80,000 pounds. And then to kind of make it understandable, and I would then say superload type categories would be 200,000 pounds and up. Now that does change again from state to state, but just in big, broad generalities, heavy haul would be those 2, sort of a step up from the legal load, 80,000, up to 150 to 200, and then beyond that, you get into a generally category that would be known as superload. And so those are the kinds of things that really, you get above 200,000, they have a lot of pilot cars, police escorts, bucket trucks, and usually backing up traffic a lot, and companies like ours getting phone calls like, did you know you're making my life miserable out here at Highway 70 at whatever time, whatever it might be.
Well, did you know that we're moving to an area where we'll make your life better when we put this bridge?
Well, if you like electricity and you need a transformer in your community, you probably need this piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's beside the point if you're trying to make a doctor's appointment or something.
Yeah, for sure. So there's other two things that we spoke about that kind of go hand in hand with a heavy haul type of business, and that would be the crane, which I made mentions before, and then industrial millwright was a term that I was not familiar with that I learned about. So talk about how those two services kind of complement the traditional heavy haul that you just spoke of.
Sure. So what we also do is the precision installation of big, heavy things. So we were talking earlier about the DIA as an example. So in order to have an airport, you have all kinds of infrastructure and equipment that makes it go. So companies like ours, and there aren't that many, we would be typically what we would do is transport big, heavy equipment or pieces of things into the airport area and then install them. So one we like to point out that we're kind of proud of is the largest escalator between the Mississippi and LA. So in the West, the largest 5-story escalator. If you were to take mass transit to DIA and get off and go up to the airport, you'll be on a big, long, kind of cool 5-story escalator. That would be sort of a quintessential full Duffy project where we haul in these big pieces that make us oversized, overweight in terms of the transportation, and then we would be lifting it with cranes to get it into place, and then we'd use industrial millwrights to make sure that it's very precise in its installation so that when you get on the escalator, you actually get from the bottom to the top. Would be sort of a full loop project of describing what Duffy does.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great example. I was on the escalator just last month. So
did it work?
It worked very well.
Good. Well, we're very proud of that. I hate to go back in and fix it on a warranty job.
Yeah. I don't know about the security lines may not have been there, but you got me there quickly.
Right.
So that's terrific. One of the things that we wanted to cover is kind of the regulations, right? So you're kind of shifting away from the crane and the millwright, but just when we're moving things across the roadway, obviously there's rules you have to follow, there's permits that you have to get. Talk a little bit about that process, because I know it can be unique to Colorado, has their own rules and regulations about where you can travel, when you can travel, and how you travel it.
Correct.
But then I'm sure there's some national standards as well. So talk a little bit about the local and national, how those type of regulations work together or are conflicting.
Well, typical of most things that involve getting states or large organizations to work together, it doesn't work that good from state to state to be direct. But staying in the Colorado, I'll say this: in order to move these bigger loads over, so you could be, in addition to weight, which I described earlier, size or dimensions could cause you to be in a permit status where the CDOT is the organization that would control and issue permits. Now, there are certain municipalities and counties that also participate and have sometimes their own rules, but generally speaking, if you're over 9.5 feet wide, you also are now in a special permit group, and if you're above roughly 13 feet, you're in a height permitted restrictions, and for good reason, right? We don't want to just indiscriminately put large things out on the road that cover 2 lanes, and so that's not really an issue. But to provide some level of sort of basic education, anything beyond than what I described in the weight and what I just described in size are all permitted type process. So in order to move these things, a company like ours, and there's quite a few companies that do oversized, overweight hauling in the state and across state lines, you have to get a permit, and that permit can go anywhere from a day and a half to weeks and even months. If we have a piece of equipment that can move a payload of 500,000 pounds. Something like that is a monster project.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at our website, the length of that trailer with the tractors is almost the length of a football field. It's like 280 feet. So obviously those kinds of things take a lot of lead time and a very sophisticated permit process all the way down to a simple permit. But a bigger concern that would tie into sort of the modern current topics of the day that everyone would be interested in, that people wouldn't normally be aware is in addition to the real traffic problems that we have, in the Front Range area, and in particular in the Denver area, from a heavy haul standpoint and moving things that make our world work, for lack of a better term, the number of roads and permit process we have is shrinking. So we have fewer roads we can use because we aren't building any more roads, and the roads that we have and the overpasses that we have can't handle these types of things. So we're having to do a lot more work with a lot less road, and at times of the day when they're less safe. So similar to anybody who's out there driving and trying to get to work or trying to get up the mountain or do anything and getting a little cranky about the basic road system and traveling, we're certainly pretty cranky when it comes to moving commercial goods and big things, because we're experiencing the same issues and same problems that the public does. I would just say it's more pronounced and more difficult.
Yeah. Is that specific to Colorado? We all live here and we've seen the tremendous growth. You and I have been in the state about the same amount of time. Are you seeing the same type of challenges in other states that you know of, like Texas or whatever? Are the rules becoming so stringent it's making your job more difficult? Is that just Colorado, or is it all over the country?
No, I would say particularly in the West, the surrounding states have been pretty good. Utah would be sort of a shining example of thinking ahead and providing a road system that's competent for growth and competent for people to get around without having to expend extraordinary time just sitting. If you read some literature, you would look at our road system from both a passenger vehicle and a commercial vehicle standpoint, and we're not rated well for all the wonderful things we do and have in Colorado. We would be considered in the commercial world in the low 40s out of 50 states. So even though there may be more regulations from state to state and more requirements and some of the issues you just suggested, no, I would say we're, unfortunately, sort of singularly not that good compared to our surrounding the states that we border in particular.
You said Utah is kind of a shining star. I don't want to put you on the spot per se, but what are they doing differently that other states to make them kind of the best?
Very, very good question. I appreciate. It's really pretty simple. They've thought ahead as to what infrastructure and road system they need to accommodate all, not just say what you need internally or in your area, but goods come in and go out and pass through, and we're not very accommodating. The mountains are hard enough to get up and over in a big truck. When you add a lot of road construction, you add a lot of not forward thinking and capacity, you end up with a lot of avoiding of our area, and a lot of people don't send things to us that they would normally. So they come in and sort of loops around and would go to the areas like Utah if they could, because really the answer is pretty simple. They've just thought ahead, have put much more investment into their infrastructure, and the road system is very competent in terms of getting up into the mountains to Park City as an example, getting from down to Ogden from Salt Lake and the like, and their overpasses are in good condition. They've just made it a priority that we haven't. It's pretty much that simple.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because people think that the mountains are so mountains aren't prevalent, but people go up there more and more, and they want houses and developments, and you need power and infrastructure to support that, and it's getting more and more challenging for you guys. So let's take a step away from how do you physically move it, but how do you create awareness on the state level? How do we take Colorado to the next level and say, look, Utah's doing all these amazing things with legislation and permitting and things. What's going on in your industry to change that here in Colorado, I guess is my question.
Well, apparently not enough, Doug, but we certainly are trying. So, I mean, you mentioned that I'm part of the executive committee for the Motor Carriers Association, and have been for a while, and that is one of the industry's main association groups, and we've been very active for a long time with some level of success, but nowhere near. It's pretty well publicized that to put our road system and our infrastructure, so that includes repairs. We've got a lot of bridges and we got a lot of overpasses that are not in a state to hold the original intended loads and need repair, that aggregate sort of number somewhere in the $9 billion range. Not an extraordinary number, but not a small number. And we're sort of taking chunks at it, and really the roadblock, no pun intended, is pretty simple. It's either the legislature or the governor's seat that are the locations where the assets need to come from or the money needs to come from. We need to make it a priority. We need a legislative effort to get there. But what we're doing now is we're funding it somewhere in the because of the excess funding the last couple of years. We're looking at, and these are round numbers. I don't have the papers in front of me. 400, 500, 600 million. Well, that's 7 or 8% of the problem that we're really addressing. And the problem it's not static, right? It's going to get a little bigger and bigger. And if we continue to pick away at it at a low number, it's just going to exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. So just so our audience knows, you had mentioned the group. So the Colorado Motor Carriers Association is what you're referring to, and you're on the executive committee, and they're certainly a friend of the show. We've had Greg Fulton on before. Maybe take a step back and explain what that group does. So if folks in the audience see them or see Greg on the news and what's going on. So talk a little bit about the CMCA, if you don't mind.
Sure. Fairly large association as associations go. There's 650-ish companies representing about 100,000 employees, so pretty sizable piece of the economy and the business community. And that would consist of carriers and then all the suppliers and those who would have interest in the industry. So you'd have dealerships and you would have repair facilities, truck stops, tire companies, everything you can think of that would be aggregate to make up the commercial vehicle industry. To get to 650 companies just in the state of Colorado, that would be the constituency that makes up that group. But certainly the sort of foundation or building block is the carriers, the people that are out there that own trucks and employ drivers and move things, or the sort of the backbone of the Motor Carriers Association.
Nice. And a significant role of that organization is to advocate for the industry on Capitol Hill, so to speak, or down at...
That is, if it's not job one, then it's job two. So,
right.
And it can alternate. But and there's no question that's, especially in the state of Colorado, more recently, there's a lot more advocacy going on, for no other reason than the topic we just discussed, which is things are costing everybody more, because we used to be able to get 2 trips in the metro area to make deliveries, and now we can only do 1 because of the traffic.
Yeah, traffic and hours of service and everything
else.
So.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there, we're kind of shifting away to like infrastructure development, which is fine because that's what we wanted to talk about. Is there 1 or 2 things that CMCA is doing now to try to advocate for awareness and new funding related to infrastructure here in the state? Is there 1 or 2 things you want to highlight to the audience?
Well, certainly we're coordinating with outstate entities also, or outstate groups, to try to build a bigger and better coalition to advocate for not just the infrastructure, which we've concentrated on, but also the regulatory environment. We have, in the heavy haul side, we need a little better coordination. Sometimes it takes a long time to get a city or municipality on board. So anything that makes it more fluid and more reasonable in cost and yet safe is sort of the arena that CMCA would play in. And this day and age, there's plenty to do, not just up at the Hill, but across the state.
Right.
So we have sort of a satellite organization in Grand Junction and a small group in Pueblo that come together to deal with those issues in that area also, not just CMCA, which concentrates a lot more on the metropolitan Front Range.
Right. So shifting back into the heavy haul type of industry a little bit, if you were having to move some loads, you talk about CDOT does a lot of the licensing, but you had mentioned that sometimes counties and municipalities get involved. So if you have to move something down here in Denver, large piece of equipment that needs permitted, up into the mountains, are you just working with CDOT, or are you having to touch other counties that I-70 may touch along the way, or how does that process work?
Well, interestingly enough, more and more cities and counties are getting their finger in the pot, and that's not a bad thing. It's probably a good thing, and it usually happens because that there's not the level 20 years ago of coordination between the city and the state. But, when you show up on a road and you've got a load that shuts down both sides of the road and people weren't paying attention to the 2 weeks of signage, it was, and everybody gets called, right? So there's been a bent towards better coordination between municipalities and the state when you're moving larger loads. And in fact, to the point now where almost every state permit has 2 or 3 components to it to make sure the locality has been contacted, and if they have any permitting requirements, that becomes a part of the state process. So the state, from a regulatory basis, not from a statutory basis, has gotten more and more sophisticated to almost demand, if you're going to have a permit to do this, that the state is coordinating with the locality. So you're finding city and county engineers are involved a lot more with what we have going on, just because there's a lot more people, a lot more traffic, there's a lot more equipment to move. And as a result, if we show up with a big piece of equipment in even a small town, of course we don't go fast. We take up a lot of room, and if you're behind us, you're probably not happy.
Right. So, yeah, for sure. Do you find that most entities that are touching the permitting process work together, or do you run into scenarios where there would be a town or they would say, "Not in my backyard. It doesn't matter. I don't want you coming through here, and it's not my problem that you have to get up to this area to build a bridge or fix a power line." Do you see that happening a lot, or does everybody work together here in the state?
I would say by and large, people work together, and if they don't initially, which is not in my backyard, an NIMBY kind of moment, it just takes a little more education. Well, if we don't, it wasn't that long ago we had brownouts here and there in the state when it comes to, say, transmission lines and big equipment in the electrical infrastructure world. But once you start to explain the necessity of moving big things in their area, and people are pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I can imagine. You make sure people aren't looking 15 feet in front of them, but 50 feet ahead of them as far as what's the ultimate goal of allowing this piece of equipment or this truck to move through.
You get something almost the size of a football field moving anywhere. It draws a lot of attention, and the initial response frequently can be, and not here. There's got to be some other way you can get there, not with it. But like I said, it's usually not too hard to get some reason and common sense that this has to be done, and we do need your help.
Yeah. Well, that's a good final question I'll have for you. Our time's winding down. But if there was 1 or 2 things that you'd want the general public to know when they're sitting behind a piece of equipment that's going up the hills or down the highway, what 1 or 2 things would you want the general public to know to help the cause?
Well, the first thing would be is to exercise good judgment and patience. A couple times a year we get people who just, even with Colorado State Patrol, say around us, there's 1 or 2 people that just sort of pull out and don't obey the signage or whatever's going on, and and can try to hustle off, and don't ever do that. That puts people in danger. Sometimes life just isn't what you want it to be, and you're going to be 20 minutes late.
Correct.
And just sort of absorb that. The second thing would be advocate for a better road system. There's no reason that this great state should be looked at both from a passenger population and a commercial population as top 6 or 7 worst, which is what we really are. The state is too good, it's too great, and we shouldn't be on the lower end of infrastructure and competence in moving vehicles and products and goods.
Yeah. That's good advice. And if folks wanted to learn more about how to help and advocate for it, I'm assuming they go to Colorado Motor Carriers Association site and go from there?
It would be a great place to go.
Excellent. Good. Well, we're so glad that you joined us today. I know the time always goes by a little bit faster, but it was fun to learn about your industry and then also its impacts on the road system and legislation pieces here in Colorado. So,
well, Doug, thank you for the good work you do, and I really appreciate the opportunity to give folks a little view into our world and moving heavy haul products around the state of Colorado. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today on the Connect and Collaborate Network, featuring supply chain and logistics, the Storytellers, of course brought to you by Cap Logistics. Thanks again.